This is CheloniaCast, episode 62. Today we are joined by George Balazs, who's a global independent sea turtle scientist. George has many years of experience working with the sea turtles of Oceania and sort of globally. He's previously held positions with NOAA. He was the leader of their marine turtle research program for over 30 years. He's also held various positions with the Hawaii Institute of Marine Biology, based out of the University of Hawaii. He's also affiliated with the Golden Honu Services of Oceania and the China-Hawaii Aloha Alliance for Marine Turtle Conservation and Research, both great groups working on connecting people, working with these incredible animals that sort of see no borders and sort of necessitate collaboration. He's also a member of the Marine Turtle Specialist Group of the IUCN and the International Sea Turtle Society, where he has served various roles. And he's authored or co-authored over 430 publications about these sea turtles sort of globally. We're really excited to have him on today to talk about his research and adventures working with sea turtles. So thank you, George, for joining us today.
Well, thank you, Michael, for this opportunity, both for future generations to view and especially for my descendants in my family to view it at some future time. I'm very happy to be a part of your program.
Well, thanks. I think we'll sort of start this off with right before we started recording. You mentioned that you've had kind of a unique career, and that seems to be true. Kind of how you got into positions you got into, but maybe starting out, what were your early years like in California and Michigan, and sort of who were some of the early influences in your life, and how did they influence your interest in wildlife?
I'm an only child. My mother and father decided that Detroit was not a place to raise a kid and to live their life, so they packed up a trailer and we moved to Yucca Valley, California, in the Mojave Desert. I think I was about 8 years old then. That would have been 1951, 1952, and didn't think, I have no memory of sea turtles or wildlife prior to Yucca Valley. Yucca Valley was a place then that had 3,000 people, and it did have California desert tortoise, and that was probably my first experience seeing and having a desert tortoise and going to the Joshua Tree turtle races in the late 1950s. And my first experience with sea turtles was actually having a sea turtle soup in Tecate, Mexico, along with Tecate beer in about, I guess it would have been 1959. I was underage. We went to Tecate and somebody said, let's order the turtle soup. And I got little pieces of turtle meat in the soup and thought, this is tasty. And then totally forgot about it for another many years.
That's interesting. I'm originally from California, Orange County, the southern Orange County, so I'm familiar with the Yucca Valley and just southern California in general. So also kind of a similar experience growing up around desert tortoises and southwestern pond turtles as well, because I'm on the coast and sort of working with those. But I think that it's kind of an interesting. You started out your research career looking at sort of the dietary and animal nutrition, I think, and then sort of ended up on French frigate shoals in the Hawaiian archipelago. And I'm curious how that happened. How did you transition from the nutritional sort of research background to spending a lot of time on this remote atoll in the middle of the Pacific Ocean?
Can I back up and fast forward as fast as I can go of how we got from Yucca Valley into Hawaii via French Polynesia, Tahiti, My wife and I married very young. I met her in Santa Ana. I had quit college at San Diego State University, went there for 1 year, 2 semesters, mediocre grades, maybe a C plus, B minus average, and decided that college wasn't for me and moved up with some of my high school buddies to Santa Ana, and where I got a job in a drive-in dry cleaners and laundry, picking up the laundry that people drove through and threw it at you in a bag. And the person I worked for there was named Gerald Peebler. He was a tremendous influence in my life because he was a righteous, honest, hardworking businessman, had 3 children, one of which passed away in the Vietnam War, which was very sad for all of us. There I met my wife Linda, who had graduated from Orange High School, lived in Orange Park Acres at the time, and her and her mother moved in the apartment right next to us, near us, where I was living with my high school buddies. And 6 months later, we were married in Las Vegas. She had just turned 19, and I think I wasn't quite 21 because my mother had to sign for me, even to get married in Las Vegas.
Wow.
Wasn't a forced marriage. There were no children. We just loved each other and knew this was the route to go. Moving along a little quicker, we went to a drive-in movie in Orange and saw a double feature that had a travelogue in the middle of it. And the travelogue was about the new international jet airport that had just opened in Fa'a'a in Tahiti. And Marlon Brando had changed the life of the world in Tahiti by the refilming of Mutiny on the Bounty. Saw that landscape of that beautiful island and the beautiful people and said, I want to go there. Can we go? We sold everything, passed through Hawaii for 8 days to catch a French airliner that went down to Papeete from Honolulu. We had enough money to last us about 3 weeks in Tahiti and met some, again, very beautiful, influential in my life, our life people. Helen and Harry March were their name, from Grass Valley in California. And they found us a cheap home in the district where there was no electricity, nothing except the beautiful people. And we ended up staying there 7 months. Ran out of money, ran out of visa, got a cargo ship back to Panama, took a bus and a plane up through Central America to Nogales, Arizona, where my mother and father met us because we were broke. Didn't have enough money to get the bus to get back to Yucca Valley. Lived in Yucca Valley with them for 7 or 8 months and said, oh my God, we can't stay here in Southern California. We can't go back to Tahiti because of the visa requirements and our inability to speak good French. Where should we go? Well, Hawaii looked pretty nice. There's a University of Hawaii. Why don't we go there and see what we can do with our lives? Landed in Hawaii in January of '65, and here we are. Never left. 3 children came along, and we both went to the University of Hawaii. Both respectively got our master's degrees. My wife in medical social work. My wife's name is Linda, and she put me through my master's degree working as a waitress in Waikiki, and just a series of things that one little shift and life would have been very, very different. If we hadn't met the Marches, if we hadn't seen that travel log. Not much of this has to do with sea turtles because, as I said, I was interested in swine nutrition. And why swine nutrition? That looked to me like a way that I could contribute to the Polynesian people of Tahiti because they needed expertise in agriculture. And my dream was to go back as a swine nutritionist authority and either start a cod farm or consult for the government or something like that. And some years later, they used to joke with me, "Oh, George studies turtles, the pigs of the sea."
And so kind of early on, I mean, in migrating to Hawaii and working there a bit and getting your master's degree, at some point you sort of transition, or I had the opportunity to visit French frigate shoals and spend a lot of time there. And I'm just curious what that was like. I mean, being kind of isolated on an atoll in the middle of the Hawaiian archipelago, and what that experience was like, what it was like to see your first green sea turtle there, and what you thought initially visiting.
Okay, if I might, please let me let me create the link so that my own mind is focused on French frigate shoals. A few critical things happened, fortuitous, beautiful people I met that got me from my master's degree to French frigate shoals. It may have just been 3 or 4 years, but it was a lifetime of connections. So my first job after getting my master's degree in swine nutrition at the College of Tropical Agriculture at the University of Hawaii, my first job was at HIMB, Hawaii Institute of Marine Biology, a little island of Coconut Island in Kaneohe Bay. My senior professor actually came over to where we were living and said, "There's a job out there for 3 months. You really should apply for it." I think he was worried I wasn't ever going to go to work and use my degree. So I did. I applied for it, and I got a 3-month job in a Sea Grant aquaculture program under 2 hard-driving but beautiful people, Dr. John Bardak, bless his soul, passed away, and Dr. Philip Helfrich, who is in his mid-90s and still with us here in Hawaii. And the job I got was to formulate inexpensive foodstuffs for fish, shrimp, marine shrimp, octopus, using local byproducts like pineapple meal, fish meal from Tuna Packer's fish plant. So I set out on that, and they were very, very open. "George, whatever you think you want to study, we're open to it. But you got to give us some results in 3 months," which of course was ridiculous.
Right.
I said, oh yeah, I'll give you results. No worry. And I did. And they extended it to a 12-month contract. And I renewed that 10 or 11 times before leaving the Hawaii Institute of Marine Biology. And one of the things I decided that I wanted to take a look at, because I had heard such glowing reports from the Cayman Islands of the Cayman Turtle Farm, Mariculture Limited, farming sea turtles. I thought, why don't I try some baby turtles? Well, where can I get baby turtles? I turned to the Fish and Wildlife Service. After some wrangling with them, they brought back 125 little baby hatchlings, green turtles, and I set up an experiment feeding them different foodstuffs. And it was, I don't think we could call it anything but a disaster. The turtles bit one another. They didn't like the things I was feeding them. But it did position me in Hawaii to be the guy that's working with turtles, not wild turtles, but trying to develop diets to farm turtles. And the transition then came after I closed out the experiment, did a few papers on some of our results, got them published, and then started thinking, where did the Fish and Wildlife get these turtles? Well, it's a place called French Frigate Shoals. Where the hell is that? I didn't even know.
Right.
Look at a map, and the island chain extends for another 800, 900 miles up to the northwest of Kauai, 900 miles, and And I started thinking, okay, well, how are the turtles doing in the wild? And in the meantime, uh, people were coming to me because I was the turtle expert for Hawaii, because the news reports had said I was working on turtles at Coconut Island. Never mind that it was captive rearing, nothing to do with the wild. And people started coming to me, George, you have to do something about the wild turtles. They're harvesting too many of them. They're being sold in restaurants, et cetera, et cetera. And there's no protection on the state government, nothing. The only protection was you're not supposed to use firearms to kill them. And that was being violated using power heads, underwater shotguns, if you will. Bang sticks, correct name. So one thing led to another, and I decided I need to go out to this place called French Frigate Shoals, see how the population of breeders is doing. By that time, over a couple-year period, I had established contact, meaning postage stamps on an envelope, written letters to Dr. Archie Carr, to Dr. Harold Hirth, to Dr. John Hendrickson in Arizona, world authorities on sea turtles that I had learned about from the Hamilton Library at the University of Hawaii. No internet, phone calls were $3 a minute. And they encouraged me to go out there and to establish a systematic way of telling how many nesters came on the beach, and therefore get some handle on an index of what the population was doing scientifically instead of anecdotally. So that sort of connects going from being a farmer, researcher of pigs to turtles to taking a look at them in the wild.
That's really fascinating. I did not realize you started out in sort of the captive spectrum and looking at sea turtles in that regard, and then just got curious and decided I need to go out in the wild and see this. A lot of people don't necessarily make that jump. So that's really a cool thing.
I was at the right place at the right time in history. I needed a job. We all need a job to support ourselves, and some people these days say, "Oh, George was the savior of the Hawaiian green turtle." Well, not really. The green turtles were the savior of me, of having a lifelong employment that I enjoyed doing almost like a hobby, until the quagmire of U.S. government employment sort of overcame me, and it was no longer doing science, but it was doing bureaucracy. But that's another story.
And we can sort of
one of the people that came to see me and virtually beg me to go out and, George, you're the expert. No, Hildy Cherry was her name. Hildy Cherry, Austrian lady that had lived her life in Hawaii. And she said, you're the expert because there's nobody else here in Hawaii. And I said, yeah, but other parts of the world there is. She said, no, you're the expert. We're depending on you. You must go to these public hearings and tell them what you had found during that first year at French Frigate Shoals. And I was scared to death to be doing something like that. First off, I wasn't Dr. Balazs. I got over that shortcoming of my personality. I got over it because I realized that it may not be so much the degree you hold, but what you do with that degree, of whatever degree you have, and what your spirit and your emotion and your energy is if you believe in a cause. And Hildy Cherry helped me to believe in the cause. Bless her soul, she passed away many years ago. But without her, at that lecture I got at one time from her, if you don't do it, George, nobody else will.
Wow.
So thanks for giving me the opportunity to say her name, because this is long ago history. It's 2024. I'm 81 years old, and I must have been 28 or 29 years old when Hilda gave me that lecture.
Well, I mean, and it is something about your work that's very evident is the connection with people. I mean, just going through your website and seeing all the dedications on there and just all of your publications. I mean, all the teams you've worked with and assembled and I mean, that's a testament to that passion that you're talking about. Is it doesn't matter what type of credentials you have, you can always build a team and sort of rally and have people come together for a cause and force your, kind of express the emotion behind the pursuit and manifest that. Well, I'm curious. Initially on French frigate shoals in the early 1970s, you were only coming across 100 or so nesting turtles a season, as I understand it, and this has changed pretty significantly. So, what was the conservation status of Hawaiian green sea turtles at the time, and maybe how has that sort of changed in current times?
Well, French frigate shoals consists of a number of little sandbar islands, really small islands, and sea turtles don't need a lot of sand to nest in great numbers on. Uh, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service refuge managers had made day trips for starting in the mid 60s up and down the chain, and they would encounter turtles basking on the beach. Rarely, if ever, did they spend night times on the islets, because that just isn't. They were there for seabirds. They were there for monk seals. They were there, yes, for sea turtles. They were there for the vegetation. They were there for the insects that occur there. They had many islands. The non-Hawaiian names for the islands, starting after Kauai, was Nihoa, Necker, French frigate shoals, Gardner Pinnacles, Laysan, Lysianski, Morrow Reef, Pearl and Hermes Reef, Midway, Curry. So their time up there visiting, normally using a Coast Guard buoy tender for transportation, was very, very limited, and they had not spent virtually any nights on any of the islands counting nesting females. They counted baskers. They tagged some of the baskers by flipping them over, heaven forbid, but they did. And not that that was terrible for the turtles, but it was a lot of work to turn a 100-kilo turtle upside down so you could immobilize it.
Right.
And I was the young buck that said I wanted to go out there and spend some nights on the islands. And the island they pointed me at was called Hikina in Hawaiian. It's East Island. It was 12 acres. It's smaller than that now due to a hurricane that hit it in 2018. It's growing bigger now, but it got down to about half that size. I went there, and Dave Olson, assistant refuge manager, set me up on the island with his boat, a little 16-foot Boston whaler with a 40 horsepower motor. Safety considerations were, nobody would be allowed to do that today. Let me just say that. Thank God there weren't the stringent safety regulations back then, or I would never have been there alone. One engine on the island. So there I was. And I didn't stay out there for 2 months straight. There was, back then, there was a Federal Aeronautics Aviation DC-3 that would fly every week or two to Turn Island, where the Coast Guard station was, and give them supplies, and I could hop that plane back and forth whenever I wanted. So it was it was quite an experience, but I was there to find out how many turtles are going to nest per night, not how many are basking on the beach, because the baskers include males, and you can't always see the tails of the males to differentiate. And there was no formulas for deciding, okay, I count 50 baskers. How many does that mean are nesting? Were they different turtles? Were they? So a couple of volunteers joined me on the week that I went back to Honolulu. They held down the fort. I rotated with them the entire season of 1973, beginning to end, on the major nesting piece of real estate for all the Hawaiian Islands, Little East Island. The total number of females was 67.
Wow.
Now, I'm not a population dynamics guy. That's why I'm so blessed to be meeting people like Milani Chalupka later on, and many others that were hardcore scientists that could use the data that I set forth. But I knew 67 didn't sound, that just wasn't enough. I give you a comparison. In 2016, 2017, when I was still with National Marine Fisheries Service running the turtle program, we had 850 some nesting females on the island in one summer.
Wow.
That's a big increase.
Yeah, it is.
And East Island, the Fish and Wildlife recommended to us that they thought probably East Island accounted for 50% of everything at French Frigate Shoals. And we verified that that was the case. There was nesting on some of the other little islets, but East Island was the mother lode, so to speak. And French Frigate Shoals was the mother lode of all the northwestern Hawaiian Islands, even though some of the other northwestern Hawaiian Islands, Pearl and Hermes, Laysan, Lisiansky, do have a few nesting turtles on it. At least back then it was only a few. I don't know how many it is now because the data is incomplete.
That's interesting. I mean, being out there for so long, there must have been some challenges and such that came up. And I mean, you said for months. I mean, you had the ability to go on the plane, but you were out there for continuous periods. And what were some of the challenges that you came across out there, and how did you deal with them?
Yeah, let me just clarify what you said there. When I said months, yeah, I was there for a good portion of the summer in 1973, and that is trying to sleep in a roasting hot tent during the daytime so you could stay awake all night long and record and tag and mark and observe. A very exhausting sort of circumstance because the sleeping conditions in this little two-man pup tent, if you will, were not good. I got $2,500 from the New York Zoological Society. God bless a man named Wayne King for making that arrangement. I was able to buy a bit of supplies, and the Coast Guard supplied me with food, canned food. But as the years went by, I continued to do this with the help of several volunteers. But most of the time, it was one person alone on the island. Two people, you trip over one another. It's just too small of an environment to have more than one person at a time. But when I finally turned over the duties in the field to people that came to work in my program, I added up and I had spent 11 and a half months of my life on that little island. So when I say I was months there, run it from 1973 through to about 1991 or 1992. Then it was mainly employees, wonderful people that worked for me that went out there that didn't know what they were getting into, but
Right.
they learned very quickly. And either they stayed. I had one person, Irene Nerzia Humberg, that is in Italy now, lives and works in Italy. She went out 4 times, 4 years, 4 summers. She was the record, I believe. Another was Tim Clark, that was for the National Park Service in Guam. Now he went out 3 times, and wonderful people that would go more than once. All right, sorry, get me back on track, Mr. Michael.
Well, I mean, I'm curious now. How did you end up doing it more than everyone else? I mean, what was the key to that success?
I wanted to do it. I felt young enough to do it. It certainly changed when it gradually changed when in 1978 I was no longer leaving, late 78. So starting in 79, I was no longer just leaving my wife at home all that time to do what she needed to do in life. But then in December 28th of 78, we had a baby, had a son. And that made it very difficult to leave, more difficult. And then in the mid 80s, we had 2 more children. And that really increased it, not only for my own loneliness for the children, but leaving the burden of raising children with my wife was not a fair sort of thing. So that was very influential in decision making. But also, I mentioned early on, it was volunteers. Later on, with Tim Clark or Irene Nerzia Humberg, some of the early people, they had to be paid. They had to make a living too. So I, as program leader, my budget, through to the great and good work of Senator Daniel Inouye, Hawaii's premier senator for all time. You probably know about him. Google him. He passed away some years ago. And when he was number 2, he was the, when he passed away, he was, I think it's been 12 years now, he was number 2 in line for the presidency. He served so long as Hawaii's honored senator, lost his arm in World War II in Europe.
Wow.
He went to bat for the turtle program, and he got funding that made it possible for me to actually seasonally hire people to go out and do that work. So, but you can't be paid. There's no amount of money you can be paid for to go through the loneliness and the separation, the isolation. Turtles are wonderful, but people are more wonderful in my life. Turtles, the world over, sea turtles, green turtles especially, I've often described them not in a harsh way, but in an honest way, as being akin to little wind-up toys. You wind them up on the nesting beach, and they all go through the same cycle of rhythm. It's rare that there's a difference. They crawl up slowly to the top of the beach berm. They raise their head, they breathe, they crawl around and make test scratches, if you will, with their front flippers, and on and on and on, all the way through to depositing the eggs, to patty caking with their hind flippers, to throwing sand over their back with their front flippers, dragging themselves forward, and some ancient click in their brain at one point says, I've had enough, I'm going back to the ocean. They crawl back to the ocean, and then 10 days, 2 weeks later, they come out and do it all over again. I'm not downplaying the wonderful behavior of green turtles, but if you watch literally over the years, thousands of them do this, thousands of times of the same rhythm. You might call them a bit like little wind-up toys too.
Yeah, it's a sort of an ancient cyclical thing that is just so inspiring and interesting that's an interesting way to summarize it as kind of I mean, you could even think about it from the perspective of the whole life history of the turtle. It sort of winds up and then the cycle just repeats itself in a longer sort of wind up toy fashion. It's an interesting way to look at it.
Other parts of the life history is what got me staying with turtles, interested in turtles, seeing their recovery. I mean, it turned into my entire life's work was a hobby that I got paid for. Wow, how blessed could somebody be to have a hobby with a lot of free reign, because I built the program, I pointed the directions it needed to go in, and all of it was in consultation with people that were one heck of a lot smarter. Akamai, the Hawaiian word for smart, academically capable in terms of ecological modeling, health and disease studies. I bonded up with what I still believe to be, and are still friends, the finest people in the world that I could inspire and give ideas to and give data to run wild in their own way with what they wanted to do. Next week, I will have lunch with Melanie Chalupka and Terry Work, both in their 60s, both the finest in the field globally. Melanie is coming up from Australia for another meeting, and Terry is the director of the Wildlife Health and Disease Lab here in Honolulu for the USGS. And both of them I've known well over 30 years, and you look back through publication records, you'll see that dozens of journal publications, and that's the currency in academia that keeps a program moving forward, is the peer-reviewed journal publications. Sure, there's several handfuls of my own over the years where it's Balazs et al., but the really important ones are Work et al. And Chalupka et al., et cetera, et cetera. People make partnerships. Remember that, Michael.
That's I think that's a very good takeaway and something that's very true and important to. I mean, a lot of people I think that have the quantitative skill and that sort of thing are sometimes not as good at organizing and thinking bigger picture. They have a hard time stepping out of that area that they're very good at. So it takes someone like yourself to provide that data and to bring people together and to recognize that people make partnerships. I think that's an important thing as a facilitator, leader. And so you took a lot of field notes, and a lot of those are available on your website for anyone interested. And I think that's a really cool idea. It's got me thinking about, I need to be doing better with that and just taking notes and making sure things are written down. But I'm curious, out of all the notes you took all over the world and throughout your career, what are the top questions that you could never get around to answering that you think should sort of be high on the list of future endeavors?
Well, it's one I'm still struggling with and working with now. I retired after 34 years with National Marine Fisheries Service. I know they don't use that name as much anymore, but that's the congressionally mandated name of the agency. They like to use the word NOAA Fisheries now because NOAA is so recognized by so many people, because it's your weather, it's the hurricane, the severe storm, etc. So the question, after 34 years with NOAA, that I'm still working on now independently, using my retirement money to do things that I do, going to Japan next week, sixth time in 2 years. Other things that I'm actively involved in. Well, I can still be active. I mean, this can't last forever. We all think we'd like it to, we want it to, but I'm not kidding myself. It can't last forever. People get older and things run slower, and I'll take it in stride, I pray. The question to me, unanswered, that I'm struggling with everywhere I go is in the world today of sea turtle populations, particularly, I'll just focus on green turtle, but it does apply to all the species, all 7 species it applies to, but mostly to the green turtle. The challenge of unanswered question is, how do we inform the public? How do we wrestle with it ourselves, those of us that have devoted our lives to sea turtles? How would Dr. Carr address it? How would he handle it today? And the question is, there is such a dichotomy in population status. There are places in the world where green turtles are critically endangered and are not recovering, are still going downhill. They're not in a majority, to my understanding, but they're there. And then there are places where, like the Hawaiian Islands, like Ascension Island and the population that relates out of there, to some extent, Tortuguero in Costa Rica, to Michoacan and Eastern Pacific green turtles that are doing quite well, certainly not on a downward spiral. How do you teach people and get them to grasp the fact that you don't think of green sea turtles as one broad paint scope, a brush of the paintbrush? You must look at them individually, and you must think of their conservation individually. And I have a difficult time doing that, and when I give presentations, often I give the same answer that I say the same words that I just now said to you to the question that you asked me. The other thing that links with that very tightly and intimately is, do we really have any success in hope for top-down driven conservation? In the case of the United States and the case of Hawaii, is it and the colonized areas of the USA, Guam, Commonwealth of Northern Marianas, American Samoa, is sending out dictums, orders from Washington: no take, keep your hands off the turtles, local people, local indigenous cultures. Is that really, in the long term, a way to conserve turtles and have those people that are historically bonded to those turtles give buy-in to ensuring that the turtles will be perpetuated for the next generation and the next generation? My answer to it is no. Top-down driven conservation, it needs to be built from the community level, the local level, the indigenous culture upward. And sure, they might make some mistakes in their management, but it's their turtles to be made a mistake about. And I have faith in the humans and the turtles that the two will ultimately succeed if the bureaucrats from far across the sea, and when I say that, I don't just mean Washington, D.C., I also mean Paris, France, or French Polynesia, and New Caledonia, where you may know there's been huge uproar of the indigenous population in the last several weeks. 8 people killed. They want their freedom, if you will. They want post-colonialism, which in some cases is mainly colonialism. They want it to go away. Give the turtles back to the indigenous people and let them take control. I wrote something in one of my booklets, my publications, my journal publication, 2017. I wrote in the end, I said, paraphrasing what I wrote, after 45 years, that was my academic career with National Marine Fisheries Service and the University of Hawaii. After 45 years of research that was designed and meant to give the managers the ability to say, yeah, the population's looking pretty good. We don't have to keep it tightly listed under the USA Endangered Species Act. After 45 years of publishing with colleagues, easily over 100 journal publications, easily maybe 200, and looking at online how many people read the publications, and more importantly, what gets done from the results of those publications. How is it translated into management actions to help the people that are the original owners, if you will, of the turtles, the indigenous people at these various places? Remember, I'm focused here in the Pacific, but there's a lot of island nations outside the Pacific where the same thing could apply to for other European colonial historical nations. How what good did all of those 45 years do? Where is the proof in the pudding that we provided information? And we mainly provided that things have gotten better. The fibropapilloma disease, which we haven't even talked about, has died out in the Hawaiian Islands with no deleterious effect discernible to the population itself. The sick turtles that died, or the regressions of the disease, that's one of the cases where we monitor. What good did 45 years of my life do, except to have names associated with journal publications that are now archived? All of them are on my website. They're archived in the places of the world for people to look at. The readership is very, very low, as it is with all journals, hardcore science publications. What good did all of this do? And if I might take the license to say, back when Hildy Cherry harassed me into going to public hearings to be the expert of Hawaiian sea turtles and say to the public hearings, we need to ban this commercial take. The commercial take is greedy because money is involved, $100 per turtle for a 100-pound turtle. The demand was great because the tourist industry in Hawaii was booming in the late 60s, early 70s. 747s were bringing over 350 people at a time. I know because my wife and I were originally one of them on a 707 Boeing. And you've got to kill the commercial incentive. And that was not appreciated amongst the local people, because there were people making good money mining the turtles. I won't say they were harvesting them. Harvesting implies some sort of sustainable utilization. They were mining them. And I convinced the people, or at least convinced the state government in 1974, 1975, based on that early years of going out to French frigate shoals and counting numbers of nesters. It was very believable. It was very believable. The state put in a regulation in 1975 called Regulation 36. As it turns out, the number 36 is pretty significant in my life, but that's spirituality we won't talk about now. Regulation 36 totally banned commercial harvest of turtles. And that, in my mind, was the salvation, the savior of the Hawaiian green turtle. They also had a provision for some subsistence use under permit where you could take a green turtle once a month, not Hawaiian, because we weren't talking Hawaiian then. We were talking the word local. The renaissance of the Hawaiian only came, and my wife and I were blessed to see it, in the 1976, 1977, 1978, when the hokulea, the replica of the Polynesian sailing canoes, made it from Hawaii to Tahiti on that historical voyage, and I think was 1976 or 77. And my dear friend, who still is alive and well, Walter Ritty, Rittee, put himself on the island of Kaho'olawe, one of the 8 major Hawaiian islands, which is only about 10 miles channel across from Maui, Kihei Maui, and South Maui, to protest the Navy practice bombing of that island. It was a bomb target. The whole island was a bomb target up until Walter went on there and they couldn't find him. So they couldn't bomb while he was there.
Wow.
He was a native Hawaiian that evaded the best of the Navy SEALs for 7 days.
Wow.
The renaissance of the Hawaiian period was then. And those public hearings, getting back to my main point, and I'll wrap this part up in a second. The main point of those public hearings that I would say over and over again towards the end, and people were not happy with me, this young haole with a few expletive deletas added into it from California that was over here trying to stop them from harvesting or from making money off of their honu. I would say, should the day ever come, and if we conserve and if we protect, it will come someday. Should the day ever come, and I'm still here, I will be an advocate for the sustainable harvest of your turtles. And I did say your, because they were not mine. They never have been mine. We came from California. And I would say that to the people. I don't know if it calmed their anger any, but it made me feel better. But of course, I, deep inside, said to myself, no worries, George. You'll be long dead before the population ever recovers, or you would have moved somewhere else where you don't have to try to make good on your promise. Well, lo and behold, thank God, I'm still alive. I'm still in Hawaii, and I still got the capacity to see that the population in Hawaii is certainly recovered enough, no matter what the government and NOAA Fisheries or anybody else says, Fish and Wildlife Service says, they are recovered enough to handle a small, sustainable harvest by indigenous Hawaiian people, that there are, not everyone, but there are people out there that want to practice their traditional Hawaiian cultural rights and history. And those are the people that I try to speak for now, because they will not come on TV. They will not come out and say these things. Most of them won't. Few do. I'm their voice because I made that promise to them. And most of those that I made the promise to have long passed away. And I made it mostly to myself, whom I'm looking at in the screen right now, trying to say to myself, I'm going to continue to keep that promise, and I reaffirm that vow to Michael and his podcast.
Well, I mean, yeah, we're really appreciative of you spending time with us to say that. I mean, that is a really powerful thing to sort of have that appeal to when you were younger and could make promises that maybe you didn't feel like you had to follow through on, but over time sort of saw the fruits of the protection and the local protection kind of play out on a surprisingly short time scale. I mean, and that sort of leads me into, I mean, the partnership that you've mentioned, Dr. Melanie Chalupka, a few times now, and there are a series of, also as you've mentioned, the academic papers are interesting to folks like us that do the podcast and a select group. It's not something that gets widely circulated, but at least for people that sort of know about those things, there are a series of papers that you co-authored with Dr. Chalupka that sort of laid out the recovery of the Hawaiian sea turtles. And he, of course, did the work on the modeling side of things and figured out that the trend was increasing at a pretty rapid rate. And in one of those publications, you talk about specifically this idea that the subsistence harvest could be something that was could be sort of viable given the recovery. And I'm curious how all of this, I mean, how did that partnership with Dr. Chalupka, how did that evolve? How did you first get in contact with him?
Yeah, that's a fun story. Um, in the, I think it was the late 80s, maybe early 90s, we held a workshop in Hawaii, National Marine Fisheries Service. And early in my career, I learned, maybe because I enjoy the diversity of people and bringing different perspectives, different expertise, maybe because I was so short myself on expertise in areas that were needed, that I backfilled it by bringing cordial people together. And convening workshops has been a big part of my life and career. And I'm really proud. In fact, just a little aside for yourself, the Hawaii Pacific University Sea Turtle Workshop, the annual workshop, we will have our 4th annual workshop this coming October. The exact date is not set. But that was something that I myself very proudly created with Hawaii Pacific University, a private university that has excellent academic record around the world. I think it's been here almost 30 years in Hawaii. My wife and I decided that we were going to leave something in legacy for my mother that passed away in 1997 at a very youngish age, unexpectedly. Anyway, we set up an endowment with Hawaii Pacific University to convene a sea turtle workshop now and after we're not here to do it. And I'm very proud of that, because except for government-funded workshops, none of which have been public because they've been all internal with National Marine Fisheries, the workshop we've set up with Hawaii Pacific University is first of its kind, and there's a lot of pride in that. So I mentioned that to you. We were going to convene it. We convened a workshop in the late 80s, early 90s on, I believe it was on long line fishing, hooking of sea turtles, which was not green turtles, mainly olive ridleys, a few loggerheads, and sometimes leatherbacks, which are critically endangered. It's called the Hawaii longline fishery, but the fishery takes place hundreds of miles from Hawaii on the high seas. We invited renowned sea turtle people. When I say me, I think it was Sam Pooley, who was a facilitator at the time. We invited Karen Bjorndal, who's still a dear friend. We invited Alan Bolton, who died 3 years ago, too young of an age, Karen's lifelong partner and husband. Very sad. We invited a number of people, but we didn't invite Melanie Chalupka. And why we didn't, I'm not sure. We didn't. And And oh boy, this was the fax era that was just transitioning into internet. I received a fax from him scolding the hell out of me for why didn't it was a downright nasty message. He never swears. I've never known him to say a cuss word in his whole life that I've known him all these years. But Sam and I and other organizers thought about it a bit and said, yeah, we made a mistake. We should have invited him. But we didn't. And we told him we apologized, and we held another workshop a couple years later on modeling, different models for sea turtles. And we invited him, and there's nothing like face-to-face, even Zoom, other things don't fulfill the warmth and the understanding of looking at somebody's eyes back and forth, reading their body language, et cetera, et cetera. So I met Milani that way, and a few years after meeting him in person and developing rapport with him, the director, Michael Lars, called me into his office and he said, we need some external contract modeling done on, and it wasn't directly on sea turtles. And he said, all these turtle people, who should we turn to contract? And I said, well, first person come to my mind is Milani Chelupka. And I'll never forget, Dr. Lars said, who? Who's that? I never heard of him. And I said, Milani Chelupka. He's in Brisbane, Australia, but it's an East European name. I forget, Polish ancestry or something. I don't remember. Not Hungarian as my ancestry is. And we contracted him, and I was the CTR, whatever the government acronym is, to be the point of contact for contracting. And we went gangbusters from there. Nice story, huh?
That's awesome. That's a little bit of feeling left out, I guess, kind of motivated him to demonstrate, to do good work, I guess. Yeah, later on.
Well, sometimes you have to be assertive, and I'm not recommending that people be obnoxiously assertive. But in this case, if he would have just written a sweet message, well, good luck on your workshop. I apologize. I'm so sorry I can't be there. You didn't invite me. If he would have just written that, I probably would have never known him.
Good. That's good advice. Well, so something you've touched upon, and there's some issues potentially with the top-down conservation, and a lot of times you hear about the federal listing of the green sea turtle in 1978 and how that's responsible for the rebound of populations and such. And you've highlighted some issues that kind of regulation has for the people that have been around these animals for far longer than, for lack of a better term, Western society has. And there seem to be some critical flaws there and how these regulations work. I wonder if you could expand a bit more on kind of the issues with that sort of regulation and what it's missing out at the cultural level.
Yeah. So let me first correct, as I do anywhere and everywhere that people make this statement. Oh, the Endangered Species Act of that brought sea turtles under it in 1978 saved sea turtles in Hawaii, if you're talking about Hawaii. No, and no. It was Regulation 36.
Right.
2 to 3 years earlier that banned the commercial harvest of turtles in Hawaii that I attribute to saving the Hawaiian green turtle. That and the 10 to 12 other fine people in Hawaii that also got behind my testimony that made Regulation 36 go into effect. Endangered Species Act, as it applies to the Pacific or to Hawaii for green turtles, did one thing for people working on turtles. It gave a pipeline to money, to funding. And I can't deny that I benefited from that. So, but as far as extending greater protection in any way that helped to ultimately restore, reinvigorate the numbers of turtles in Hawaii, I would strongly disagree based on I lived through it. I know what was involved, and there's not many people around that can still say that. So I'll stand on my word on that one. People don't like to hear that because the Endangered Species Act is a symbol of conservation, but there are parts of it, in my opinion, and shared by others that sometimes don't want to talk about it, because just like many people don't want to talk about a sustainable harvest, because that means lethal take of a turtle for food or spirituality or traditions. And I believe this pendulum amongst the sea turtle community has swung considerably over to, okay, I'm not going to label it left or right, but it's swung like pendulums do to the opposite end of where it was at in the late 60s and in the early 70s when I first became involved. So I try to correct people each and every time they say that. I'm a believer in, as I said, that the turtles do, maybe to ask the provocative question, who owns the turtles? Who owns the turtles? I flashed that slide up on the screen at a workshop in Fiji, in Suva, Fiji, at the University of the South Pacific in December of last year. And it perplexes people at first. Well, you get all kinds of answers. Who owns the sea turtles? Who, we can be stewards of them, but when in the Pacific Islands, and I dare say it may apply to many other places of the world, I contend that the local indigenous people that have a linkage with sea turtles that date back millennia are the true owners of the turtles. Not everyone agrees with that. And I think it's time in many places and cases, that the post-colonial conservation strategies that people use, because that's what they were raised with in Western university settings of academia, how to study, how to do that. I think it's time that they let go, and either it's by voluntary letting go or through, heaven forbid, I don't like what's happening in New Caledonia, but it is reflective of when a colonial power hangs on for so long, and it's equally the disdain that runs deep through the Hawaiian community of the overthrow of Queen Liliuokalani with rifles and the tacit backing of the U.S. government. Can we go back in history? No. Do those of us that are the descendants of cultures that overthrew other, at the time, less forceful in terms of arms and armament that they had, can we change? Do we need to cry to ourselves all the time that our ancestors did this? No, absolutely not. We can't change the past. But can we speak out for what we think in certain arenas is right and what is wrong? And I say it is being a turtle person and devoting my life to it benefiting from the turtles, benefiting from the Hawaiians' turtles and other people's turtles in the research that I was able to conduct on them. I say that give them back to who the original owners were, thank them, and if they make mistakes in their management, so be it. It's their turtles to make mistakes. Sustainable use includes, indeed, how do you have sustainable use tested unless you have some use? And we do have use of Hawaiian turtles right now, but the use is a waste. It's the injury and death that occurs from fishing line entanglement. It's the injury and death that comes from accidental boat strikes by careless drivers that go too fast in certain areas. Those are dead turtles that are, as of last count, the National Marine Fisheries Service continues to catalog them and take them to the landfill and bury them with yesterday's garbage from everybody. Disrespect that shouldn't be tolerated, and it's not being tolerated by a part of the indigenous Hawaiian community of Hawaii. Speak out and say what you sincerely believe. And I sincerely believe that after 45 years of journal publications, I did a lot for my own career. I did a lot for other careers, but it was Regulation 36 that saved the Hawaiian green turtle and continued to this day. And now is the time to recognize that we have green turtles here, there, and everywhere. That was not the case in the 70s and 80s. It was the case in the mid-90s because I have newspapers from Honolulu with headlines that say, "Come back, sea turtles restored." You know, it doesn't say they were legally recognized as restored under the Endangered Species Act. And by the way, in case, and maybe room for another podcast with another person, the U.S. Endangered Species Act does not recognize Hawaiians as being Native Americans. Therefore, there is presently and always has been no easy mechanism under the Endangered Species Act to allow a Native Hawaiian to harvest even a single turtle. There could be, but it's going to take the will of federal employees still in the system that I retired from to recognize that they need to speak out so that their superiors will hear their voice as to what is wrong and what is right, with a capital W for wrong and a capital R for right. And it is oh so wrong that the Hawaiians have no mechanism joined by the Saipan, Commonwealth Northern Mariana Islands, Guam, and American Samoa, no legal mechanism to take a turtle. Does that mean they never take a turtle? Don't kid yourself. Of course they do. But what does it make them in the eyes of their children and their grandchildren? It makes them criminals under USA law. And that, my friend Michael, is the greatest wrong that you could imagine, the greatest sin, that they cannot practice their cultural rights without being criminals. I rest my case.
A lot of people may not understand. I think sometimes the ties and the sort of expanse and space there is in terms of how turtles are perceived and integrated in different cultures. And you've studied this not just in Hawaii, but across many different island nations and in many different areas in the Pacific. And I'm curious how the cultural significance of the green turtle or other turtles differs just across Oceania and different island nations. I think that if people can kind of understand that, maybe there would be a little bit of the fact that Western culture is not the only way to view things.
Sure. I've been very blessed again, and I keep recognizing that blessing. Maybe the spirit of the turtle, maybe the God that I believe in, I don't know. Maybe my wife, who has always encouraged me to continue in my quest. I first traveled to other Pacific islands in 1977. Ironically, one of the three places I traveled to in 1977 was New Caledonia. I first went to Western Samoa, now independent nation of Samoa. Back then, when it was a colony of New Zealand, it was they had the word Western associated with it. I went to Fiji. Very early on, got its independence from the United Kingdom. And I went to New Caledonia, and I went there looking at turtle farming. Interestingly, again, the rearing in captivity and the outside world of ecology of sea turtles were a bit separate for me in those years. But they came together. And so, the first thing I would say is, I guess you need to understand, and I do not understand it fully, but I know some feeling of it, the word mana. M-A-N-A. It's the energy that comes from all things, living or non-living, that is a part of life, even though the word may be different. But mana for the Polynesian people also extends, of course, into Micronesia, Melanesia, and the Polynesian Triangle that Hawaii is the northern limit of. I think I learned what I'm going to tell you now, and that is empathy and understanding and bonding during the 7 months that my wife and I lived in Tahiti, when really my only contact with sea turtle during those 7 months is that I had the burden and the joy to go out in the lagoon of Paia, no electricity, kerosene refrigerator, canned food at the local Chinese store. I would go out and spearfish for our dinner. And I remember a very memorable moment. I had this inexpensive small arbalete spear gun, a little green turtle, only one I ever saw while snorkeling in the Paia area, a little juvenile, came darting out from its hiding place under a little cave. And I wasn't quick enough to shoot. I did shoot, but I missed it by a mile. It looked like dinner to me. And looking back now, I'm thankful I didn't hit it, although maybe life would be very different. But it was food. It was the refrigerator of the reef. And that's one of the things before Western conquest and absorption of many of the areas. The ocean is your refrigerator. It's your food. And the mystical nature of the sea turtle runs from one end of the Pacific Oceania, Easter Island, if you will, all the way over to Palau in the Micronesian end. I think that Palau would probably be the most western. I'm not looking at a map. People have learned, even if they don't get all their food from their refrigerator of the ocean, they have learned their ways from their ancestors because they know their genealogies. Even the Hawaiians that were stripped of their language for so many years, In the 1950s, my friend Bill Puleiloa, bless his soul, was in high school on Molokai. And if he spoke Hawaiian in school, he had to the teacher made him put on a dunce hat and sit in the corner. Maybe the 1950s sounds like a long time ago to you. Doesn't sound so long ago to me for something like that as abusive to a native culture to be done by the people that came from across the sea. And the turtle being able to transcend the atmosphere of breathing air and the very deepest depths of the ocean to speak of, and to find, navigators of the Pacific in how the Pacific peoples found their new islands, how they found Hawaii, and settled and lived in Hawaii was through celestial navigation and patterns of waves and little things that were passed on from generation to generation to generation. And a part of that navigation, and the more I talk about it with people, the more important it seems to be, a part of that navigation was finding those little tiny remote places where the sea turtles themselves migrated to lay their eggs. I'll leave it at that for now, except to say 2 days ago, I attended, and I will attend later today, the 13th event called the Pacific Festival of Arts and Culture. 13th since 1972, so that's not held very often. But this year, for the first time, it's held in Hawaii. And I wore a T-shirt that says, I don't have it on now, but I got it made just the other day online, Amazon. What do sea turtles mean to you? And I didn't walk around pointing at my T-shirt. I just let it flow. And I was there about 1 hour, and a very tall, stoutly built, youngish Hawaiian man walked by me, and I know he was Hawaiian because he had a T-shirt on that said, "I'm Hawaiian. This is our land." He walked by me and he said, he turned around. I could see he was turning around. And he said, "Our honu mean everything to us," with a big smile on his face. And I said, "Wow, you really emphasized the word everything, didn't you?" He said, "You're darn right. Have a good day." And he walked on with his wife and I think a kid that was with him or something. Everything stuck in my mind. So not that many people said anything to me the other day, although I could see eyes looking at my shirt. But the word everything really rang to it. It weaves through everything, and it even wove through the less than 5 seconds that I met that man and he met me, and we're not about to forget each other, even though we may never see one another for our life here on Earth.
The connection that exists between, especially cultures and different cultures in Oceania with turtles is really a unique. Well, honestly, I mean, not really. I think that the Western view of turtles is actually unique in a negative way a lot of times. And you think about, I'm in the southeastern U.S. A lot of times, the relationship is sort of abused. I think, and in Western culture, there's an overuse and overconsumption, whereas that's something that is the respect is sort of lacking here in a lot of ways, where it's manifest in a lot of the cultures in Hawaii and elsewhere. And you see that in that little interaction. You probably wouldn't see someone in the southeastern United States even regard that shirt or make a joke about how it's going to be dinner or they've hunted this many of them. That's not the connection that exists there, and that's a really a cool thing to see, and testament to the fact that the green turtles there are also a resource. Like you said, it looks like food if you're sort of struggling to survive in a more sort of that kind of condition. You've traveled.
Let me
Yeah.
jump in then, Michael. Hold your question and let me, Mike, jump in and say food is more than food. And I'll tell you the story briefly. An island I've been blessed to visit twice that has 250 people on it. It's at the far extreme outreach of the Tuamotu archipelago of French Polynesia. The Western French name for it is Napuka. The local native name for it is Te Puka-Maruya. And I was there 2 times, only 1 week each time, but it was very, very inspiring. And one thing you've got to understand is that there's food and then there's food, and there's the mana, the life's energy, the life's blood that comes from eating certain foods, maybe all foods. And the ancient history of Te Puka-Maruya says that when when a family member dies, when a family member dies, 1 year from that date of death, the family member's spirit will send a nesting turtle ashore. They will send that turtle ashore for the family to eat and enjoy and remember the ancestor. And through the eating of that turtle, you become a part of the family, and you stay connected even though that family member is present but not visible, and is with you, beside you, but not in the visual sense because they're in the other world. And curiously, I found a lot of that same thoughts in traditional religion of Taiwan, which is a time for another story about experiences in Taiwan. So food, yes, but what that food brings you is not just protein and calories and lipids. It also brings you energy to sustain your family line, to pass on to your children and your children, etc. Thank you.
Well, I want to get into, you mentioned Taiwan and just sort of Asia broadly, and I want to get into that because that's a really key component, I think, to sort of globally place the significance of Hawaii's marine turtles in general. But before we do that, just in all of your travels, I'm curious what what is the one trip or place that stands out the most in your mind, other than Hawaii, where you've conducted the majority of your work?
One place. Well, there are several, but something must come to me this moment. So let me meditate and let the memories flow. Okay. So my wife and I spent that time in Paea in Tahiti, 1964, the early part of 64, for 7 months. And then we had to leave Tahiti and go back to California and decide what we were going to do with our life. But I never wanted to leave Tahiti. Place has always been a keystone in my life. And I saw that travel log and was able to go to Tahiti, and then sadness, weeping tears to no end when we had to leave. The dream for years and years and years was always to go back to, that's where the tropical agriculture came from. Swine nutrition. Contribute something to the people that would allow me to, my wife and I, to stay there. It never worked out. Even we bought a sailboat and lived on a sailboat at the Alloway Harbor in Honolulu for 8 years. The dream was to sail back to Tahiti, a dream that never came true. Best it got us was to the island of Lanai for a summer, got us to Lahaina, got us to Molokai. I did not go back to Tahiti until 1990. So what does that come out to? That comes out to, you added up for me, 1964 to 1990. That's a lot of years. It was almost like a lifetime. And
26 years, yeah.
How many years, please?
26, I think, or yeah.
I got to go back because of turtles. I had made a name, something for myself, and people contacted me from the fisheries division in Tahiti, a man by the name of Philippe Siu, that worked for fisheries division, and he invited me to come to Tahiti to go on a trip to a very remote place called Sili Atoll, Manuai, 150 miles from Bora Bora, but still part of French Polynesia. And it's still a well-known place for turtle nesting.
Wow.
So without telling that story, here I am on a Hawaiian Airlines plane in 1990, 6-hour flight, going back to Tahiti where I hadn't been in 26 years. And wow, I'm back again. The plane landed, we got off the plane, and I remembered somebody we met, I guess, at the airport. I was a priest, got off the plane in 64 when we went to there and went back to the airport to meet somebody. He got off the plane and he got down on his knees and he kissed the tarmac. And I got off that plane and I remembered it and I did the same thing. Probably the most memorable. My God, I am finally back and I'm still alive. I got back here and praise God. And yep, that's my memory.
That's a great story. I think I spent some time in Madagascar in 2018, so it's only been 6 years, but I was really young at the time and it afforded the opportunity to go there. But I think I would probably do the same, even in that short amount of time of just, I can understand the establishing a connection with a place early on in life and then experiencing things in between that and then going back and seeing it through a fresh lens. I mean, that's a powerful thing.
Well, my experiences with place, if I have to come up with them, and I do in my mind regularly, because I say, okay, where do I want to be buried? Where do I want my ashes? That's another story, but I decided that a long time ago. I want to be with my wife. That's one thing I want to be. My places of place turned out to be, to this day, Yucca Valley, California, which I went many times after my father died, after my mother. That was 2004. Tahiti, French Frigate Shoals, and the Penghu Islands of Taiwan. So those are my links to place. And I think about all those places all the time. And yeah, it's a sense of place, latitude, longitude. In fact, I've always documented exactly where, is there something magical in the numbers about the latitude, longitude of certain places? Or is it the memory that does it? Or, and by the way, Michael, Terry Work is the great grandson of the infamous general that was the ruler of Madagascar, a very harsh ruler that is, I think he told me there's a monument to him, but he was a a colonial, not a good guy for Madagascar. See if you can look it up. WORK. I believe that was his great grandfather's family name, but he is the grandson of a tyrant of Madagascar who he feels very bad about, but he can't change the history. I admire Terry for even telling me about it.
That's really interesting. I'll definitely have to look into that. I've looked a bit at the whole history of the monarchy there is really interesting to follow. I think it's got the record for the shortest regime, a 6-day regime before there was a coup that overtook it, and just little things like that. But yeah, I'll look into that.
What I'm talking about, and by the way, Terry is culturally as much French as he is American that he is a citizen of. But this was under, what he told me, I presumed it was under French, when the area was a French colony.
Right. Yeah, it is. I mean, French is, everyone speaks French there. So that's.
I didn't even know that. So it shows my ignorance. It's just not it's not one of my places, but it certainly could have been if I could have gotten there.
Yeah, it's very remote. I think I calculated from Southern California, it was the furthest possible point that I could be on land minus Mauritius. Mauritius is a few hundred kilometers further. But yeah, quite an adventure for a 8th grader, and to be as far as possible from home. And maybe that does establish some relationship to place, like you're saying. I can relate to that as well, in terms of certain areas just feel more conducive to who I am and than others. And it's fun to experience the whole gamut of how place feels. And it's an interesting way to verbalize it like that. I've never heard it done like that, but it's an important aspect that I think is not put into words as much as it should be.
When I said my places, I, of course, I foolishly and wrongly left off the place I'm sitting at right now, 992 Avanoa Place, where we have lived for the past 46 years, where our first son was born, and not to forget that. And I think place might mean when you're there, you feel normal, you feel comfortable. And when you're not there, you feel a longing to be at that place. So, boy, how conflicted can one be when I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, actually 4 places then, including Hawaii Kai, where I'm sitting right here in Avanoa Place. So, 4 different lives. My wife and I I've been scanning more family pictures for the webpage, which is at a password protected place because it's got a lot of personal stuff in it. And going through all these pictures, my wife helping me remember where were we, who is that in the picture, because you live average between my wife and I 80 years, 62 of that is your adult life. You've lived a lot of lives in a lot of different places. I guess we have anyway. So it's like, whoa, this was a part of the life, and then there was that part of the life, and yeah, ever since the late 60s, the turtles have been the leader, or as I tell some people, the needle that has a thread on it that weaves you through the silk fabric of life, taking you, introducing you to different people, different places. Bless those turtles, and bless the people that are bonded to them, just the way I'm bonded to them. And that remote island I was telling you about, that Philip Siu invited me to go on a trip out there. They had not seen a ship for 7 months.
Wow.
We arrived, and it was a family, a very controversial family, but it was a total of 26 people, most of which were children on the island. And they were very happy to see us because we had cigarettes and some beer for them in addition to canned food. And I found out a little bit later, we were there for about a week, that the first night, Rene Caputo, the head man on the island, went out and killed a nesting female, and his wife, I can't remember her name this moment, came back and cooked it and served it to us because it was a meal of honor that we were the first outsiders they had seen in 7 months. And there was this huge plate of cooked meat and stuff on it in front of me, around a regular table that had parayus on it for tablecloth, inside a partly thatched hut with teenage girls standing around the table waving a little cloth to keep the flies off. And I was told this was, Rene honored us by killing a turtle this morning so that he could give us a feast. And I'm sitting there, the big shot sea turtle conservationist from Hawaii, white boy as it was, thinking to myself, what the hell am I going to do? Am I going to eat some of this turtle? Or am I not going to eat it? What? And it really was no great decision, because I thought to myself, when in Rome, and here I am, a place I had dreamed about, and it wouldn't be very good manners to say, oh, no, thank you. Right. So they had forks there. I don't know where they got the forks. They had forks, and everybody kind of piled in and stabbed a piece of the roasted underground oven, emu, we call it in Hawaiian. I forget the name in Tahitian. And I stabbed a piece of this roasted, pretty nice looking barbecue meat, if you will, and put it on my plate. And the guy next to me, Jean-Pierre Landry, bless his soul, he got a massive heart attack in his 50s and passed away. I met his daughter years later, who remembered me from that 1990 being in Papeete. He was having a hard time cutting it. They didn't give us a sharp knife. And I just took my fork and, man, it cut real easy. And I thought, oh, okay. Put it in my mouth and started eating it. And I realized, oh my God, I'm not a fancier of liver, of chicken liver, pig liver, any kind of liver. Never liked liver in my life. And I suddenly realized from the taste that I had stabbed and put on my plate a piece of turtle liver, and it did not taste good to George. So I'm sure everybody must have seen it, but I slipped my piece of turtle liver back into the big serving plate. Took a piece of what was real turtle meat, flesh,
Right.
And joined everybody else in kind of biting it off the stabbed fork, and realized, pretty damn good. I was hungry anyway. It tasted real good. The bottom line of this story is that months later, when we were back, Philippe, or maybe after we returned to Tahiti, Philippe said to me, Rene and his wife were watching you. I said, what do you mean they were watching me? They were watching you to see if you would receive their gift. And I said, what gift? And he said, the turtle meat that they cooked for you. They were watching to see if you would eat it. And he said, we're so happy that you did eat it, because you would have been treated very, very different if you had rejected it. And I said, well, I did it naturally. It wasn't a pain to me, and it tasted darn good. And if I was stuck on that atoll for my life or years at end, you darn right I would thank Mother Ocean for the turtle that the ocean would send us every so often to be able to eat that delicious protein. The empathy with the people that were there, and pretty darn lucky of me, or fate, or mana, or whatever you want to call it, that I switch the liver for real meat because they could tell the look on my face that I was indeed enjoying the barbecued muscle from the turtle.
Right. That's a good advice too for future sort of endeavors for anyone listening. In terms of don't reject the food proposed if you're ever in a situation like that. It could be sort of a not necessarily a test, but kind of a gift, and if it's not taken in the right way, that could signal some bad faith or something analogous to that. So that's a really interesting story. And so you mentioned, I think we want to talk about the migrations and the global connection of sea turtles, but I can't help but think that this is a good time to sort of bring up the photographs that you're scanning. And there are some that I sort of prefaced you with that are particularly interesting. I think the one that stands out to me is there's a group of folks I recognize, you, Dr. Pritchard, and Dr. Carr may be in there, but there's certainly some other people I just don't know the face, but I'm sure I'd recognize the name. But someone's holding an interesting size class of leatherback, and everyone's looking at it. I'm just curious what the scenario for this was.
Yeah, and no, Dr. Carr is not in that particular photo. He's a pretty shy fellow, you know, and a man of few words. And maybe because I babble on and always have on behalf of turtles and people, maybe that's why he took me under wing and did the wonderful things he did for me. But no, he's not in the photo. So the photo is, to the best of my memory, looking at it, and 1976, the Miami Seaquarium in Miami. And most of the folks in the group were chosen by Dr. Carr and by Tom Harrison. Tom Harrison and Dr. Carr, I'll call him Archie, but I don't want to become too familiar that way because he was on a pedestal for me. I was in awe most of the time because when he said something, it was profound. We were a chosen task force for IUCN, the SSC, used to be called the Survival Service Commission. Now they changed the name, it's called Species Survival Commission. And we gathered in Miami on our way to Cayman Islands, Georgetown. And the task force was to do an independent outside evaluation of what was known then as Mariculture Limited. This long and up and down bouncy history of farming sea turtles in the Cayman Islands. And we talked about that a little earlier. I drew my inspiration initially in a positive way about the Cayman Turtle Farm. That was the name it became after Mariculture Limited. And I was so honored to be a part of this task force because I was already starting to question the veracity, the honesty, yes, honesty, of the literature that the Mariculture Limited was telling the rest of the world, including to get them to buy common stock in their corporation, on really what the future could be of commercial large-scale green turtle farming. Very, very skeptical at that point. And because I seem to be riding the fence as to skeptical, yet I was doing studies myself in Hawaii, Dr. Carr chose me sight unseen to be part of the task force.
Wow.
And he also chose other people who were on the fence line. Peter PCH Pritchard was one of the ones on the fence line. George Hughes in the picture from South Africa, the man far right, second from right, in his South African, before independence, came to South Africa in his uniform for the South Natal Parks Board. So we were in Miami, and we got an invitation from the director, who's not shown in the picture, to come and see this little leatherback that they had raised from a hatchling. And that's amazing, because
Yes.
leatherback are incredibly difficult, at least they were back then, to raise in cap, because they boom, boom, boom against the side of a tank, bloody their nose, and nobody knew exactly what to feed them, et cetera, et cetera. But here, they had raised this little leatherback to, I'm guessing it was 45 or 50 pounds is what I'm thinking. And the man holding it is one of the caretakers. The woman immediately behind him is Pat Foster, who was a sea turtle biologist in her youth. And they actually brought out the leatherback and weighed it for us on that tip scale and let us all see it. Several of us thought at the time, including Dr. Carr, who walked out of the picture for some reason, I'm not sure why, we didn't think that was probably the best thing to be doing for this precious little specimen. And but it lived for at least another year being raised by them, and then it died. And I don't recall the circumstances why it died, but they had brought out this leatherback for this illustrious group to weigh it on this scale. And let me run down left to right, because I know all of them like the back of my hand. Far left is Wayne King. Bless his soul, he's the one that gave Zoological Society and Florida Museum. He arranged for me to receive this humongous sum of $2,500, which was a lot of money back then, to allow me to continue for a couple of years with that funding to buy tents, buy various supplies that would get me out to French frigate shoals to continue monitoring the turtles there. Then there's Pat Foster with the name badge. And then immediately behind him, is Ross Witham, a Pearl Harbor survivor who came out for the 50th anniversary and then passed away. He was a person in Florida whose name was very well known, because his mission in life was to head start and raise little green turtles. He deeply believed in head starting. I believed in some of the things he was doing, and other things he was doing I didn't believe in. But he, well known to the history of sea turtles in Florida. In front of him is Tony Mentz, who was from Switzerland, from IUCN, was the executive officer. Behind him is Cavalier and Know Everything, because he pretty much did know everything, Peter Pritchard. I think he wrote a book about turtles when he was 12 or 13 years old. He wrote some other books that were self-published that were well, anyway, very well known. His wife, Sybil, is still alive in Oviedo, Florida, and he has a little Chelonia museum there that he converted his house into. In front of him is Karen Bjorndal, as a young a young undergraduate PhD student of Dr. Carr. Behind Karen, who still in touch with, she's one of the organizing committee of our 4th annual Hawaii Pacific University workshop this coming October. Tell you our theme and another conversation that I know you'll be interested in, but not for now.
Okay.
Behind Karen is David Ehrenfeld, who was from the very beginning a adversary of commercial turtle farming especially the way they designed it for the Cayman turtle farm. He wrote a historic article in the late 70s, published in Science magazine, at least a magazine that got out to more people than just the hardcore journals like Copia and Marine Biology and many of the others that are not read by a lot of people, almost never by the general public.
Yeah, right.
The title of his article was Mariculture. Can farming save the green turtle? And his unequivocal, very deductive logic through the article was the answer to that was no, nope. And when that got published, I reproduced hundreds of copies of that and handed it out to everybody and anybody I could find here in Hawaii, because here was a guy promoting sea turtle farming, but then suddenly realized, wow, they're really fussy on what they eat. How are we going to develop byproducts for them that are economically suitable for their nutritional benefit and fast growth? It seemed like mission impossible to me, and I switched fences early on. Anyway, next to him, a dear friend who haven't heard from him in ages, Stanley De Silva. He was from Ceylon, the present day Sri Lanka.
Right.
Stanley De Silva. I think he's still with us, retired in Toronto, Canada. Behind him is Leo Brock-Ursma, who was more of a other than sea turtle sort of person, but he was an academic who wrote some very interesting papers and well known. And then thank you, Michael, for recognizing me. I don't know how you recognize me, but I thought we should wear a tie. I should wear a tie, and I was right in line with wearing a tie. A mentor who came to Hawaii a couple times to help me out in ways. Behind me, there is Dr. Harold Hirth of the University of Utah, and he was Dr. Carr's student for his master's degree. For his PhD, Harry Hirth, Hirth, and as recently, quote unquote, recently as 1997, he updated a synopsis of the biological data of the green turtle global. He updated a 1971 FAO synopsis that he had done. He updated in 1997 that really should be a Bible for all sea turtle people. You could take a person off the street, and if they would read and digest Harry Hirth 1997 green turtle synopsis, you could almost be an expert overnight if you could digest everything he has in there, or at least know. It is an astonishing piece of work that is, not that many things have changed since 1997. That may be a startling thing to say, but as far as the basics for sea turtle ecology, biology, behavior, they're all there in Harry Hirth's document. To the right of him, George Hughes, who I get a Christmas card email every so often from. He's retired and still in South Africa. And then way far to the right, the even more controversial than in sea turtle world than Peter Pritchard was and still was, to the far right is Nicholas Mrozowski.
Wow.
The founder of the Marine Turtle newsletter, and a long, rugged story of the departure that him and Dr. Carr made of being colleagues and friends to Nicholas going off on what could only be described as a outlier tangent in some of his thoughts, but then others were pretty good thoughts. So, I mean, he was a top-notch scientist, University of Toronto, educated in degrees, PhDs from the great University of London. I've forgotten what it is right now. Sorry, I'm forgetting some things. Anyway, bless his soul. He passed away, but really kept people in the turtle world
Well, that's impressive, and that's quite the lineup. I would say that everyone there is a recognizable name, and especially Rosovsky. I've read through his work, and especially related to the Cayman Turtle Farm, had a lot of interesting views about that, and like you said, kind of controversial as to um, how effective that could be for a tool for conservation.
Yeah. Well, let me tell you this. I just remembered this about eating turtle, and I'm not going to, I won't name names. I thought it may not be appropriate to name names, but when I think Pat Foster, everybody in the group back there, and Archie Carr, but not Pat Foster, ended up in Cayman Island in Georgetown, and we lodged, and we took 2 field trips to the Cayman Turtle Farm, and we had lots of seminars over a 3-day period. There was a fellow named very respected Sir Arthur Parks, I think was his name, and I forget where. Obviously, he was a sir. He was knighted, and very respected from Cambridge. That's where Nicholas Graduate got his PhD from, I believe. And we all would go out to eat dinner together. We would go to some of the banquets that the Cayman Mariculture Limited arranged for us. And of course, in the restaurants, the tourist restaurants of Cayman Island, what do you think they sell there? Prominent on the menu, green turtle steak, farmed green turtle steak. And I never ordered it. I didn't think the setting was appropriate, but let me tell you, at least 3 and at least maybe 4 people of the group ordered it, commented on how it tasted in relation to wild green turtle. And for the young buck of Balazs, who went on in 1990 to enjoy the turtle meal, and in other places too, where it was appropriate and culturally sensitive to join with the local people. Extreme high level people in the group ordered turtle steak and enjoyed it and commented about it. And that taught me a lesson. It taught me to say, well, maybe you learn from these experiences. If my heroes had ordered it and enjoyed it and were not philosophically opposed to it at that particular moment, at that particular time, why should I try to be more uptight than they were? So that was a little learning lesson too. No names named.
You're leaving us wondering, and I mean, that's interesting, and it must have been sort of maybe a contentious thing for folks to do that around other people that probably were not so much in favor of that.
Well, if it was contentious, they kept it to themselves.
Wow.
That was a good thing. I kept it to myself. I talked about it years later, but no, it was kept to themselves. And I'll have to find the place. I need to find this place. It's probably in one of Dr. Carr's writings. Dr. Carr was not opposed to local coastal peoples, as he would say it, taking turtles and eating turtles. And I know the village of Tortuguero, where his turtle camp was first located in the late 1950s, the local people there regularly took a turtle for their own sustenance and their own nutritional needs. And even though there were descendants of slaves mixed with this indigenous population, I dare say people build their own culture, especially after generations of generations. The cultures, no criticism of it, and one should always have acceptance of it, as I feel in my heart and soul. But at the turtle camp, I don't know why I'm remembering this. There was a Miss Junie who was his chief cook, and she would cook turtle stew for him and the science staff every so often, and he had no qualms about it. What, as far as I could tell, as far as I knew, he didn't brag about it. He didn't. He didn't tell the story that I'm aware of. I think he wrote about it in some places, but not overly so. He didn't emphasize it. But perhaps when in Rome, what the Romans are doing is not everything, but you know what I mean. And his dislike and opposition was to the poachers that came in and would kill a nesting turtle to strip out the callipee, to collect the eggs, to take the eggs, or to strip out the cartilage in the plastron, because of the commercial incentive. I could see the comparison with what he used to be adamantly opposed to as that commercial incentive. I could see the comparison between Hawaii and what was happening down in Totoguro. Although I did visit Totoguro in 1979 when Dr. Carr was still with us. I think he died. I'm forgetting now. I shouldn't forget. I think he died 1982 or 1984. But he was one with the local people, because if it wasn't for the local people, he would have no turtle camp down there. He would never have been able to create what went on to be started out originally as the Brotherhood of the Green Turtle. I think it was called International Brotherhood of the Green Turtle, which later turned into CCC, which later turned into the organization that's vibrant and with us now, with David Godfrey, the director of it for 25 years or longer at this time, based in Florida. Roldan Varde is the chief scientist on that one now. I think the pendulum is, maybe our education outreach was too good. Maybe we impressed upon people too much the beauty and the gracefulness and the mystery of the turtle, and somewhere along the line forgot about the fact that beauty of this animal to indigenous peoples most always includes the consumption of that animal in rituals, in feasts, in high school graduations over on Molokai, in 1 year birthday of, I name all kinds of cultural sorts of things where it fits. And we stressed instead Amakua, where turtle is your Amakua, or personal family animal. I hesitate to say the word God, but Amakua, God, family God. You don't eat your own personally God, your Amakua in Hawaii, and iterations of this same thing throughout other parts of Polynesia. But that doesn't mean you try to talk your neighbor into not eating a turtle just because your family doesn't. And I'm afraid that somehow I'm responsible for allowing that to go unnoticed. And today in the government, National Marine Fisheries Service, NOAA, NOAA, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and other NGOs, they leave it to the conclusion of the audience that, oh, everybody in Hawaii except the chiefs and kings of Hawaii could not eat turtle, and only and they were all sacred and amakua, and you never ate the turtle. You only worshipped it and protected it. Not so, my friend. Absolutely not so. And you go through some of the brochures that comes out these days from NOAA, you would never realize. Every so often they will mention, oh, the chiefs could consume, but that was reserved for the. In other words, they try to bend 1,000 years of Hawaiian history into one little capsule that suggests that no, Hawaiians never ate turtles before, so there's no legitimate reason for anybody to eat turtles now. Baloney. Baloney said respectfully. I wish there were forums to debate these things, but most of the people on the inside of debating something that they can hide behind a government paycheck and government supervisors and the Endangered Species Act to say, hey, we got the upper hand, everything's protected now. Why should we give one iota? All right, I've rambled on a little bit too far. I think, Michael, we need to go to session 2 at some future date. I'm confident I'll still be here walking upright and able to talk to you again.
Well, that sounds good to me. I think, there's still some stuff to get to, but this has been a great first part to this. And I mean, just talking to you about what we've talked about so far is, it makes me feel good. There's sort of a sense of, I mean, your passion for sea turtles is palpable and inspiring. And so I look forward to continuing the discussion because I think that, I mean, this is one of the situations. There have been a few others that have gone hours just because there really isn't any way to cut the story short. So thank you for the time so far, and I look forward to continuing the conversation if that's interesting to you.
It is, and we can come back to the other pictures, which do have stories to tell, nice stories. By the way, the picture of Dr. Carr and myself, you'll see I'm wearing the tie. I think that photo it was taken by Nicholas Merzowski. Thank you, Nick. Thank you, Nick, for taking that picture. It was taken not more than 15 minutes after the group picture was taken, because the rest of the trip, I don't think I wore a coat and tie on the trip. And it's there. I can repeat it later. Dr. Carr walked over to me. We had already met in person before that. And it was just a personal little ceremony in the parking lot, because that's where we were, the parking lot, Miami Sea Aquarium. And he said, he handed me a comic book. And he said, I want to give you what I think is the greatest piece of conservation literature ever written thus far to protect sea turtles. And I'm like, wow, you mean it's not one of his articles from Copia or Florida National Museum, or what he's handing me with wait till you see the cover later on. It's got a bikini clad gal on the back of a sea turtle riding it like a hose. It's all in Spanish, and it's got a Mexican man popping his eyes out at this cutesy cartoon of a girl on the back of a turtle. And I'm thinking, what, God, Dr. Carr is giving me something. I'm going to hold this precious. And of course, I still own it. And what's even more precious is that Nick clicked this picture and then had the mind to send me the picture later on. And in reflecting back, I have to say that it goes right in line with my 45-year plateau of generating journal publications. it's not, Dr. Carr clearly must have thought to say those words, that this is the most important piece of conservation outreach. He must have thought that that comic book trumped, not to be confused with modern day, with the trump card of all his books and journal publications and other the like of academia, because he pointed to this comic book that he must clearly have thought would reach tens of thousands of readers, whereas his journal publications probably reached dozens or maybe several dozen that would read it. And his books, maybe, I don't know who would have gotten the book and read it then, a few thousand maybe, but certainly not tens of thousands, no matter how many sold. Even myself, I bought some of his books and read the first chapter and then put it on the shelf. Well, that's good enough. I'll get to it later, you know. But a comic book, the regular people, the poachers of eggs in Mexico, all of those things. So maybe in a small way, Dr. Carr placed his trust and faith more in the regular person than the academic PhD person. You know, I don't know. I'm just guessing. Okay. All right. Next time.
Yeah. Well, I have some ideas too I was just thinking about before I let you go, about ways to continue it. I have some outstanding travel funding, and I'm thinking that potentially if October works, I may try to make the symposium. And it might be
that'd be great. That'd be great.
It might be kind of interesting to sit down and do a in-person session if there's time to do it.
The very day of the symposium might be tough because I'll tell you what would be good is the day after the symposium or 2 days after, because it really drains me dry because I'm so intent on making it work, and it's worked 3 times in the past. I'm very proud of what we've done. So, but we'll leave it open and see how, and especially after I disclose to you what the theme that we have a theme. The first theme was diets of green turtles. It was coined food for thought. Carla McDermott, my good buddy marine botanist, was the one on that one. Then the second year it was conservation communities of Oceania, cultural aspect. We didn't get a lot of people talking cultural, but that's okay. That was our theme, and we got that second year we opened it up to Zoom, and we were able to get HPU was able to have the Zoom. Then the third year, which was October 4th of last year, the theme was stranding programs, and that went around the Pacific quite well, and from Hawaii too, and that's where we finally got our NMFS NOAA sea turtle biologists to get on scene and get filmed reporting the latest for stranding level of stranding turtles with fibropapilloma disease, showing that what we hear from all the people in the neighborhood and across the state, indeed, the data do show it, that the disease is dying out. It has declined significantly. It may be with us forever, but there's lots of things that are going to be with us forever, like COVID and occasionally mumps and other things like that. It's going to be in the natural population. Yeah, I'll do everything I could to help you. In fact, I would put up some of my, not a lot, I will put up a small grant to complement your travel out here for it. it would come directly from my mother's money, my pocket, and let's just say $500.
Well, wow. Yeah, I will make it a point to do that then. And I've got some ideas for it, but that's something we can follow up on. And if I were to come out, I would make it a multi-day event and find the time that works best for you to do that. Obviously, not during the symposium itself, but it could be interesting to talk to some other people too, or integrate them in the in the conversation. And but we should continue to talk about that, and that would be really an honor.
Absolutely. And with that, I'll try to. I'll see what Brenda Jensen, the dean at HPU, can do, because I know they have a few guest rooms right on site at Aloha. It's called Aloha Tower Marketplace Campus, and it's actually the infrastructure immediately associated with the incredibly historic place of Aloha Tower, which for decades and decades was the highest building in Honolulu. It's right at Honolulu Harbor. You Google it, Aloha Tower, you'll see it. And there are people here, and especially working age professors for Hawaii Pacific University, that you would want to meet, that might give you ideas for other shows, other things for Hawaii. Yeah, right on.
Awesome. Yep. Well, we'll be in touch about that, and this has been a great first part to this long-term conversation that is just incredible to have the opportunity to have. And it's hard to put into words, but thank you so much, and look forward to attending the symposium in general. And
very good. And I thank you, Michael, because when I said photos seem to have the ability to last forever, spoken word we hope can last forever through the digital media and other stuff. And I like doing this for my wife and for those great-grandchildren yet unborn, etc. Maybe they'll take a look at it and say, who the hell was this old guy, George, my great-grandfather? I can imagine Terry Work would be ecstatic if he could listen to the words of his great-great-grandfather. And when I'm going to have lunch with, as I told you, I'm not forgetting, I'm going to have lunch with Terry and Milani on Tuesday. I will write down right now to remember to ask him, what's his life work? Who the hell was he? And a guy that I've been speaking to named Michael on a podcast is in love with Madagascar just the same way I'm in love with Hawaii and Tahiti.
All right. Well, let me know. That is an interesting piece of history, and I'll look into it as well. That's a cool thing to know. Well, not a cool thing necessarily, but it's an interesting fact.
No, it is a cool thing. It's a cool thing to have a realization of what the people back then went through. It's timely and topical, and it's self-satisfying to know that things have changed, but there's a lot of things that still need to change, and things that are wrong with a capital W. And if you believe in yourself, knowing what is right with a capital R, and could conjure up the intestinal fortitude to say what is right, no matter what others that you love and respect. You know that there's a lot of people out there on Sea Turtle. There's a lot of people in the Sea Turtle community that love turtles and do great science. And although I don't know for sure, I think it very likely that there's a great many people out there of the younger generation that don't have the least idea who George Hughes is, or Nick Marzowski, or, maybe they read one of his books that others called the Dirty Little Book. Like, that was one of Nick's, but it's on my website. It's all there, and some of the parts of it I can maybe you're familiar with it. He presented new ideas and new thoughts that revolt people of today. I'm convinced there's a goodly number of people out there that respect what I say, but greatly dislike me for saying and promoting what I think is right. And what I think is right is that it's okay, and indeed it's to the benefit, ultimately, the conservation of the species, and to our obligation to treat all people to decide their own fates and futures. Freedom, if you will, democracy, if you will, the right, liberty, and the right to choose, that if indigenous peoples that own the turtles, that there are some among them that want to take a turtle, kill it, cook it, and feed it to themselves and to their ancestors, to their families, and demonstrate through the rituals that they go through, the killing, the cleaning, the distribution, if they're in a big village and family, it is their God-given right to do that. And we can talk to them as equals and say, probably not best that you get every one of them. Probably not best that you harvest too many than what you use. Use your intuition. Use your ancestors' knowledge to decide how many, because I don't think Western science will ever give them an answer. Maybe AI might give them an answer. How many turtles can we safely take? We don't know until we take some turtles. But I can tell you, turtles are already being taken in Hawaii, not to eat in any numbers, but being struck by boats, being killed by entanglement in fishing line, and a lot of other little incidental things. There is a harvest of turtles called bycatch in Hawaii, or accidental incidental mortality from boat strike, that is, a dead turtle and a dead person end up being the same thing, dead. And it's only those that are still alive that differentiate how that animal was killed. There's got to be some wisdom in that as to if we could eliminate 20 of the dead turtles a year that are killed in accidental fishing line, shoreline fishing line entanglement in Hawaii. If we could eliminate 20 of those 50 or so, could not those 20 be legally given to the Hawaiian people?
Right.
I mean, you add it up, it still comes to 50, and there's no reason to believe that anything that's going on, including the fibropapilloma disease, has affected what seems to be the unstoppable growth and recovery of the green turtles in Hawaii, at least in Hawaii we're talking. And a lot of this is what I want to focus our fourth Hawaii HPU workshop on. I'm not going to give you the name of it yet. I'll keep you guessing on that until we get our organizing committee a little bit more rolling. I mean, hell, it's only, oh my God, it's June already.
I'm thinking the same thing. Yeah, it's gone by quick.
And oh my God, I'll leave you with this, the oh my God, and I remembered it before saying it right now. Oh my God, June 1st of just a few days ago, June 1st, 51 years ago, I got off of that FAA DC-3 propeller plane that landed at Turn Island and set foot on French frigate shoals and said, oh my God, what have I gotten into? And 3 days later, June 3rd, 1973, 51 years ago, unless I'm subtracting wrong, 51 years ago, Dave Olson motored me over to East Island to show me the ropes of what it was like camping on Little East Island. And as we were motoring up to the island in the boat that I would subsequently use after Dave flew back a few days later, go back and forth. As we were motoring over the island, it was glassy smooth. Boy, no wind, hot. And I thought, wow, this is paradise. It's beautiful. Look at those birds. Look at that island. Look at the birds flapping their wings. And suddenly, the back end of this 16-foot Boston whaler, boom, and the old engine on the outboard engine, it it revs up again. We both turn around and look, and there, right at the surface, it could not have been any smaller than 14 feet, given the size of the Boston whaler, was a tiger shark that came up and bumped the propeller of the boat. Dave said, well, that's never happened before. And I went to myself, oh my, what have I gotten myself into?
That's your landing. Wow.
The lesson of that one was that it didn't break when I found out later, outboard motors of that size do not have shear pins that shear to save the angle of the propeller. The shark must have bumped it on its nose right at the cone at the end of the butt because it didn't bend any of the propeller, but it sure as hell shook the motor and shook the boat. And I went, oh my God, I'm not going swimming here.
Right. Yeah.
All right. Aloha. Goodbye. Thank you. Thanks for doing what you do. And I would say that even though I saw you only in the early beginning, that these daggone turtles have brought me together with another person to make people and partnerships a reality in life.
Well, and
you.
Yeah, I mean, this is an awesome opportunity, and I've known your name and from your work since probably about first grade when I first got interested in them. And so it's really like the way that you looked at Dr. Carr and Dr. Pritchard and that I look at them the same, that you're sort of in that realm for me. So it's really a cool, kind of a surreal thing to be able to connect and hear your story and get this sort of documented and learn for my own sake and to share it with other people. So, yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. It's an honor, a pleasure. And lost my voice here. My wife went out shopping, handed me a note saying there's lunch on the table for me if I want it.
All right. That's a way to end. Well, we'll continue the conversation. And I think the bycatch and the fibropapillomastosis is things we need to. So,
absolutely.
I look
All
forward
right.
to
I
that.
got to run.
All right. Good talking to you. Bye.